When you're ready, yep.
Yep. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on 14th August 2025. We have no technical issues so far this morning, having said which, jinx it, but if there are any problems and I get thrown off the call, Paul Eadie has agreed to take over as chair in that event. So, welcome to the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest in terms of section 1.2 of the agenda? No? Thank you then. We have apologies this morning from Angela Leach, but I have no other apologies intimated to me. Okay then. Item 1.3, the minute of the meeting that was held on the 21st of May, and that's here for your approval as an accurate record. We have had notification in advance of a proposed amendment to the first bullet point on page 4. The proposed change indicates that resources may not be used effectively and that some HMCICS recommendations would be closed soon. And the BDO recommendations will remain open until all designated posts have been reviewed. So with that amendment, can I ask if members are happy to approve the amended record as amended minute as an accurate record? Okay, thank you very much. Item 1.4 then is the action log, and that's here for your consideration. The proposal is that the action that's in that log is proposed for closure. Will members note that, content to note that closure? Thank you. And then if we could take a decision in relation to section 1.5 about taking items of business in private. The proposal is that items 6 to 10 be taken in private. Are members content to approve that? Okay, thank you very much. So moving to the first substantive item on the agenda, item 2.1 is the internal audit update, and that's here for discussion. So I'm handing over, I think, to Claire Robertson from BDO.
Thank you. So on progress, the plan is largely progressing as expected. We had hoped to get the overtime report to this meeting, but it's still in draft report stage, so it will now come to the November meeting. Our KPIs are all on track. The results of our follow-up work this quarter, there were 74 recommendations that we followed up. 23% were implemented, 71% partially implemented, and 3% not yet started, and a further 3% superseded. I'd particularly highlight from the overdue recommendations that 36 of the recommendations are high priority, and some are also very aged, so 3 of them are from 21-22 year, for example. So there's still quite a bit of work to be done on implementing internal audit recommendations, and you'll hear a bit more of that again when we come to the management of recommendations report later in the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Claire. So, any members got any questions for Claire on this update? Pauline.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire. I just wondered if you could explain the delay to the overtime report. Obviously, this is a major cost pressure for policing, and we heard about this yesterday at the Resources Committee, so I'm particularly interested in the reasons for the delays, given the significance of the issue.
I guess just the scheduling of the report, and then the scheduling of the field work, and then the amount of I guess like data we've been asking for to enable our testing is meant that it's taken a bit longer, and we don't want to sort of rush the management responses. We want to give adequate time for them to consider how long the recommendations will take to implement and to kind of make sure they're kind of comfortable with the recommendations. So it's almost there, but we're just waiting for those final management responses.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Claire. Paul.
Yeah, do you know what impact on services and delivery of services these delays are having? Is there any detrimental impact?
In the implementation of recommendations, do you mean?
Yeah.
I guess that's a difficult question to answer. The recommendations that are outstanding are really varied and in lots of different areas. So I can't really kind of come up with a solid answer to whether not implementing them is having an operational impact. But certainly I feel it's leaving a number of areas where there's risk exposures that are not kind of within the appetite of the organisation. And when we come to the management of recommendations report, you'll see that one of the suggestions within there is a bit of an exercise to look at reprioritising to make sure that we really understand which ones are the most impactful and the most kind of beneficial to have implemented. And there's kind of plans in place to address that, but I won't preempt the discussion of that report too much at this stage.
Okay. I'll maybe hold off till then.
Thanks,
you.
Paul. Yes, thanks, Claire. Katharina.
Thank you, Mary. So, yeah, I suppose my question, I could probably also wait until the more substantive report on recommendation management, but my question is more for, I suppose, Police Scotland rather than for our auditors. So we obviously get this report where we see the overall picture as to this is the totality of recommendations. And I was wondering, now we are obviously scrutinising this at this committee, what is the route where some of that data is presented through the Police Scotland internal governance? Because I mean, we're obviously looking at this, as I say, as part of this committee, but I'm just wondering what's the internal scrutiny on that, and if there's, and again, I'm quite happy to wait if it's best to cover that when we get to the more substantive internal audit report. But it's just, that was just something that really jumped out at me.
Angela, did you wish to come in there?
I'm happy to answer that question again now or as part of that wider discussion, but the governance structure is in place at all levels across Police Scotland in terms of the presentation of the recommendation progress and improvements that are being made across the organisation. We have divisional dashboards that sit at the divisional commander level, which breaks down the progress and the development and the improvements within that level, which has been a new introduction, which we've seen real improvements since the introduction of that a few months ago. They sit at all management boards in terms of what's relevant to that particular management board, and there's a complete oversight at the Police Scotland Audit and Risk Board also.
Thank you.
Okay,
Angela.
I mean, just as a follow-up then, so there is, and that's really reassuring, so thank you for that. So it, you know, by the sense of it, there is sufficient internal governance. I'm now then, I suppose, more interested in what are the decisions that are being made, because what we're seeing here is we are seeing less recommendations being completed within the timeframes. And so if it is then that despite the fact that this is all quite visible at all layers in the organization, there is still that slippage, you know, I suppose I'm really quite interested in the root causes for that. But as I say, I'm happy to wait until we get to the substantive report further down in the agenda.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Paul, you wanted to come back in?
No, is my hand still up? Sorry.
Oh, it is. Yes. Sorry.
Do I beg your pardon?
John, did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just a final point, really. I wanted to call out the good work that the BDO have done on the Power BI dashboard. I think if you remember that this was a challenge we put to our internal auditors before, where the progress update was very lengthy. I think we were growing to almost 100 pages of detail. So it was to find another way of presenting that information that was more accessible to members. So what we've got here is our first attempt at a Power BI dashboard, which gives you all that information. So I wanted to thank them for that. And again, we'll be looking for your feedback just to how we can improve that over time.
Yes, thank you very much for that, John. It is very helpful. Last time I remember a very, very lengthy report, which ran to many pages. So it's definitely an improvement to have access to this via the updates that you've provided. So thank you very much. Anything else on item 2.1 then? I think members have indicated that they will take the opportunity at items later on in the agenda to pick up on the concerns we have about the number of recommendations which are still to be implemented, so we can pick that up as we go through. Okay then, moving on to item 2.2, which is the Police Scotland Audit and Improvement Recommendation Tracker for Q1. And Angela, I think you're presenting this to us.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair. This is an update for Q1 covering April to June 2025. There are 245 recommendations across 52 publications, excluding the new internal audit reports, which BDO will present at this meeting. However, it is important to note that 77% of our recommendations are less than 2 years old and therefore have been added recently. 18% of recommendations have been open for 3 years and 5% of recommendations have been open for more than 4 years. There are 56 recommendations newly added this quarter, all of which are attributed to internal audits. In terms of closures, we have closed 59 recommendations this quarter. Amongst the closures are some that have been open for long periods of time and subject to delay, along with recommendations that we have closed early. In relation to the closures, we have very briefly summarised some of the outcomes of the closures. We have linked all our recommendations to the joint strategy, as well as the vision and the business plan, to ensure they remain in line with our focus. In terms of date changes, there are 124 that have had a delay. This is a reduction since our last report, mainly due to the introduction of the quarterly divisional dashboards, which I mentioned previously, and due to intervention by the DCC Spheres in relation to a deep dive which was instructed in June 2025 and which we've had some successful outcomes from. We are continuing to review those with long-standing delays, but the reality is a number of them have live action tied to our 3-year business plan, and they will be delivered on time. Some are IT dependent, with phase 3 costs, or PEX dependent, and we are trying to identify what, if any, action can or needs to be addressed prior in the interim period. A small number of the recommendations are high risk, 16. More high risk delays are reported through our internal auditors, where we have found it difficult to evidence what action has been taken in order to mitigate the risks in which have been identified. Although they are delayed, it does not mean that a significant amount of work has not already taken place to make these improvements or to try to mitigate the risk. Our internal management systems and reporting progress have made our audit management team carry out quarterly reviews to try and give assurances that work is progressing. We have incorporated this information in the reporting pack. Within Appendix B, it will show very high and high risk recommendations with their status and their progress. And as mentioned previously, we do have a governance structure in place at all levels within the organisation to ensure appropriate scrutiny is given to making these improvements. We have some planned improvements to how we report and manage and reprioritise, which will be implemented over the coming months following our reparenting with the Strategy Analysis Directorate. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Angela. Happy to open it to members for questions. Pauline.
Yeah, thanks very much, Angela, and pleased to hear about the recent improvements that have been made and the work being led by DCC Spheres. I know that it's particularly challenging when you've got so many recommendations and some of them are particularly old, but I was slightly concerned at the comment on page 8 of the report that given there's an unlikely chance of reducing the number of recommendations from the oldest age category, the concentration now is on more recent recommendations to maintain momentum and minimise delays. The risk with that, of course, is that we miss the high risk recommendations that are in the older age category, and we're exposing the organisation to risk that is out with appetite and tolerance levels. So I just wondered if we could say a bit more about how we're really kind of focusing on those recommendations that are having the kind of a highest risk impact and managing or mitigating those risks in the interim whilst we implement the recommendations of the recent audit, which we'll come on and talk about.
Thank you. Happy to have comment. In relation to that, I suppose that's maybe a slightly misleading comment. The ones that are high risk are always our priority within Police Scotland and how we manage those recommendations. And a lot of the older ones already, a lot of work has been done in terms of its progression, such as organisational learning, the undercover module and the events resourcing. The difficulty with getting those over the line in terms of closure is being able to provide the appropriate evidence to fulfil the requirements to close down that recommendation. So it's not to say that work's not already completely in traction within this space that we can evidence. And it's not that we're not prioritising those. It's just making sure that the work that we are doing is in line with the vision and our business plan, and that is the focus of Police Scotland.
Okay, is that okay, Pauline?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think there was also a comment in the internal audit report, previous item, that there's work ongoing between BDO and Police Scotland to try to kind of relook at those longer term recommendations to make sure that they are still relevant in light of the 2030 vision and other developments.
Any other member got any questions? And I think the concerns we have, as Pauline's outlined, around the number of recommendations, the number that are outstanding, the length of time some have been outstanding, and the risk attached to some of the recommendations not being implemented. So we've had this discussion at a number of meetings, and again today, and then we've got helpfully we've got the internal audit report coming up under the next under item 3 on the agenda, so we can pick all of these up. But as Paul highlighted, one of our concerns is if there is any detrimental impact on the service because of these things not having been overtaken. So we'll be keeping an eye on all of that, obviously, as I know Police Scotland's leadership team will be doing as well. So probably can move on from this item now, and we'll pick up anything that's still outstanding at item 3.1. Okay, everybody happy with that? Fine, thank you. In which case, item 2.3 is the SPA's Audit and Improvement Recommendations update, and we have John to present that.
Thank you, Chair. So taking the report as read, just to pull out some highlights as usual. Firstly, on our business plan, we've achieved 71% of the milestones we were expecting by this point of the year. And what that means is there are 7 milestones which haven't been achieved, but we're expecting that they will be fully realised just slightly later within the current financial year. And the report highlights some of the achievements over this first quarter and gives you a bit more information on those areas that have been reprofiled. Looking at the recommendations, we've been able to close 2 of our HMICS recommendations, and we have just 1 recommendation which is overdue. And that's related to something from the internal audit of risk, which we're quite confident actually that will be coming to the member seminar next week, and I would see that being closed pretty soon. And the very last slide in the pack gives you an update on the progress from last year's HMICS inspection of the SPA, and we're making pretty good progress. Again, we expect all of those recommendations to be completed by the end of this financial year. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any questions, comments on this report? Generally positive, and it's helpful, I think, in particular to see the progress in relation to the areas for development that were outlined in the strategic review of SPA corporate, and good progress there, so that's helpful. Does anyone have any specific questions for John? Nope. In which case, thank you for that report, John. And moving on to item 3, internal and external audit reporting. And we have 2 internal audit reports on the agenda today. The first one, health and safety, and the second one we've referred to a number of times already on the management of recommendations. And I think I'm passing now to Claire. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So
Thanks,
I'll take
Claire.
the health and safety first. You'll see we've given limited assurance over both control design and control effectiveness in this area. Whilst we did note investment in a number of improvements in training, investigations, quality improvement work and internal assurance processes, there are quite a number of areas requiring improvement. We have raised findings around a need for more robust risk assessments, around better understanding of assurance gaps and consideration of investment in additional assurance to fill any gaps identified. We've flagged a need for better analysis of training needs and improvements in provision to match that analysis, and also enhancements in reporting to include things like any hazards identified through estates processes, and also a need to enhance procurement processes so that any PPE purchased is fit for purpose and is not kind of causing discomfort or kind of limited in its usefulness. So strengthening there. I think most significantly, we've noted that there's a number of areas where there's kind of a slowness to respond to things. So it takes too long to publish or finalise health and safety procedures. So in some of the ones we looked at, they'd actually become out of date by the time they were finalised because there'd been changes in kind of regulation and working practices. Also, areas where training was approved but not actually made accessible on the learning and development e-learning platform for some time after that, meaning there was no ability to actually access the training. A lack of consistent senior staff attendance at the Health and Safety Board, instances where divisions are not engaging with the annual certificate of assurance process, which is the key control really to make sure that divisions are following health and safety practices. Corrective actions that are implemented as part of that certificate of assurance process are not being implemented on a timely basis. So I think a number of these areas are suggestive of a culture where health and safety is not given sufficient profile and sufficient priority. So we think improvements in this area should be kind of carefully monitored over the coming period to make sure that these implementations are addressed.
Thank you, Claire. Does anyone have any questions on this report then? Katharina.
Thank you very much, Claire. And yes, as sort of colleagues have already indicated, and as the report states, this is obviously health and safety is fundamental to how every organisation, particularly Police Scotland, needs to run this business. And there is quite a substantial number of recommendations there as well. So, but I think what was probably most concerning for me there is what I kind of heard in terms of, well, read in the report, but also in terms of the voiceover narrative, is just that prioritisation of health and safety and the culture of health and safety that is in place in Police Scotland. And I think where I do take some comfort from is the fact that management have accepted your recommendations. So most of them, I think. So that's good. But I suppose I am probably just, again, particularly the first two around the risk assessments and the not adherence and a lack of that audit and assurance program. Again, the question I have is, so why does it take an internal audit and a particular deep dive into this for these issues to kind of surface? Because again, I would have expected for some of that to have come through the Police Scotland internal governance procedures as well. So it shouldn't really take the third line of defence to come in and say, actually, there's certain fundamental principles of good risk management here that are kind of missing. So I am just quite keen to understand what assurance can be provided by Police Scotland to us that firstly, health and safety is being appropriately prioritised, and secondly, just if you can maybe just illuminate a little bit as to why do you think this audit has come back and it has had those high risk findings that haven't been picked up previously internally.
Thank you, Katharina. Angela, are you volunteering for this one?
For an element of it, I just probably want to add, from a Police Scotland perspective, it's important to highlight that Police Scotland actually asked for this audit to be conducted. So our head of health and safety actually asked specifically for us to have this audit with internal audit, as it was important to us that we recognise the need for it across the organisation. But I've seen obviously Peter's on the call, so he might want to add. So sorry, Peter, to jump in, but I felt it was important to highlight that matter. Thanks.
No, that is helpful. Yeah, I think it is. It's good to know that this was one that Police Scotland wanted done. So that's helpful. Thanks, Angela. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose the simple answer to Katrina's question is these issues were known to us. The audit has actually just supported that we know where the gaps are. But to give members a bit of comfort in relation to the risk assessment side of things, we have made some real improvements around that. We have a new member of staff with us on the team that, and she was recruited specifically to look at our risk assessments. So she's been reviewing all the, we used to call them generic risk assessments, we now just call them risk assessment templates. I need to get used to the new terminology because I've been in this game far too long. I'm the dinosaur. I've been around for 38 years, so I'm getting used to that as well. But we are basically doing a lot of work around the risk assessment. In relation to the sort of culture change, we are also getting now more access to some of the management training courses. We are now getting inputs. So our team are going in and actually doing health and safety inputs, and we are seeing some improvements where Dawn has been at a couple of meetings of the divisional commanders as well. So we're making inroads, but it is something that we will continually work on. So hopefully things will improve in the near future.
Thanks, Peter. Katharina, did you have any follow-ups there before I bring Paul in?
I mean, thank you both for being so candid. I think, so as I say, absolutely welcome the fact that this was an audit that was requested, and it's good to know that by the sense of it, some of those issues were almost self-identified. So that's good as well. I suppose, yeah, and once you identify what the problems are, the key really is the completion, is the quality of the recommendations and the work that comes on the back of that. So again, really welcome the fact that you've had some resource added to your team on this. I think that's good. I think from my perspective, this is just a question of kind of monitoring the completion of recommendations and seeing the progress, and having some ambitious but realistic timelines around that. Which yeah, but good. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I have to say I welcome the self-knowledge, the understanding of where you think gaps are, and also using audit as a tool to try and reinforce that and act upon that. So I do welcome that kind of self-assessment approach. I think is to be welcomed. What I've got a question about is on the detailed findings, and it's the aspect relating to not taking risk seriously. Where is it? The formula of words I'm looking at. It's disappeared. Never mind.
Is it about not being prioritised?
Yeah.
Paul?
Yes.
Yeah.
The non-adherence to risk assessment guidance, and you've identified some things there in that. I'm curious. You've got 4 cases of incorrect GRA usage. I'm curious to know what sort of subject areas they were in. Are they particularly high risk areas? Is there a particular heightened risk from this? So if you could maybe expand on that a little, I'd welcome that.
Peter?
It's on page 6 of, and it's detailed findings. So.
I would have to say, from my point of view, I'm not sure on what they actually were, but I can give comment on probably where this finding comes from.
Yeah.
What we've found, and I'm talking about my own lived experience over time, that maybe there was some, as we used to call them, generic risk assessments, were being used instead of, they weren't getting used properly. It's probably the best way to describe it, Paul. So rather than taking the template and looking at whatever the risk is, the specific risk in your area that template can cover, and then you adapt, you take the bits out of it that are in relation to what you're doing, and you then create that specific risk assessment. So for example, we have a template for football matches.
Yep.
But the risks associated at one stadium might not be the same risks at another stadium. So, but you take the template and you adapt it and then actually produce a specific risk assessment. So that, I think that's what those findings are about. And I can say that I think that situation will improve because we are getting that message across now. For all the team, we are invited to the planning meetings, whether it's a gold group, a silver or whatever, and we are then asking for the risk assessments and we are guiding them far better now as well. So hopefully that one will be sorted in short time, but that would be the background That would be the understanding, the background from me, Paul.
Right, so there's nobody at heightened risk from the situation as it stands.
No, I don't think it would have caused a greater risk. What it was not accepting that this is a template. This is not to do with what you're looking at. So it means, for me, from a health and safety point of view, I want to see a risk assessment from people that tells me that they have actually looked at the operation or whatever it is they're doing the risk assessment on, rather than just a cut and paste, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Cut and paste doesn't tell me anything. Well, it does. It tells me that actually people are not doing what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to do a risk assessment. Don't just do a cut and paste from somewhere else. So that's, but we're getting better at that.
Okay, grand. Thanks for that, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Pauline.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the report. And I recognise that this was asked for by management, and I welcome that. However, some serious concerns obviously been identified here, and I was particularly concerned that the comments around a lack of value and prioritisation by senior leaders within Police Scotland around health and safety. So it would be helpful to hear from the Force Executive about the value being placed and the priority now being placed on health and safety within Police Scotland, please.
Thanks, Pauline.
Chair, I think that would be me.
Yeah, thank you.
So there has always been a focus on health and safety. I think having Dawn coming into post has really highlighted how important the consistency of approaches across the organisation. I think that's where we've struggled. So some areas have been really well gripped and looked at in terms of officer safety, etc. But actually some of the other areas we've let slip over the years in terms of the way that we operate and the things that we are doing. So Dawn has been very clear with us as an executive that this is an exceptionally important priority and area of work, and as a consequence of that, Alan has stepped in around making sure that we are picking up these recommendations and moving them forward. So I suppose the short answer is exceptionally important. We've now got health and safety slots on our management board to be able to talk about the areas that impact us, particularly as portfolio leads, and it's exposed areas that we perhaps didn't understand was such a problem or thought things were being done that weren't. So I think in terms of this report, the recommendations are exceptionally helpful because they give us the ability to be able to use these in our management board and really kind of hold officers and staff to account in terms of the different areas. So absolutely a priority for us, Pauline, and a really important point and question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bex. Any other comments or questions? And I think obviously this committee will be keeping an eye on the recommendations here and the implementation of these as we go forward, but I would imagine that the People Committee will also want to be regularly updated on progress with the recommendations in their regular health and safety monitoring reports from Police Scotland. So that would be, I think, helpful to have that assurance as well. Peter.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, it was remiss on me. It was just to give a further assurance to the members. Obviously, we only got the final report, I think it was 2 days before Dawn went on annual leave, which is on just now. But with the draft report, Dawn has already started drafting up the action plan. And hopefully that'll be nearing completion in short term when Dawn comes back from her annual leave. So we will have an action plan that obviously can get reported back to the committee when we've got that in place. So it's just to give, we are working on it as we speak type of thing.
Great, that's really helpful. And obviously both ourselves and People Committee will be keen to track those developments. So thank you very much for that. Is there anything else then on this particular internal audit report? If not, the second one on the management of recommendations, we've alluded to it on a number of occasions already, but Claire, can I pass back to you?
Yes, so for this one, we've given moderate assurance over the control design and limited over control effectiveness. This audit was also carried out at a time where I guess management had identified that there were issues here and were in the process of doing an internal investigation on how to enhance this area as well, which I think was initiated by the audit management team moving to the Strategy and Analysis Directorate. So what we found at the time of the audit was there was a good system in place in terms of facilitating action owners viewing and updating actions. They were getting automated reminders. The audit management team was reviewing all the recommendations every quarter, was offering one-to-ones with owners to discuss, appeared to be sort of appropriately resourced and have be doing a lot of engagement activity to try to get recommendations closed out. So really doing probably everything that could have been expected of them. However, despite that active support, most recommendations were not being implemented on time, and there's a bit of an acceptance of non-implementation over like longer periods, and we felt insufficient scrutiny at the time through management structures and no real formal consequences for not implementing actions on time. A lot of the suggestions that we've made in this report to improve are also aligned with the results of the internal investigation. So I think that's important to note. But essentially, we suggested improvements to escalation criteria in order that management can focus on the most important recommendations and clear some backlog. So at the minute, the escalation criteria sort of apply to most recommendations. So it is, I think, making it more difficult to hone it in on which ones are having the most impact and need to be implemented first. The planned review of kind of governance structures, we hope we'll see enhanced scrutiny through management structures, enhancements to the dates that are set in the first place, making sure those are realistic and align with other areas. So I think by improving that prioritization and planning, both the target setting and the adherence to those targets should improve and better support continuous improvements. So we get to look forward to monitoring these changes over time as part of our quarterly follow-up process, and hope that the active changes and improvements that are being put in place will have the impact that's desired.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. You're saying you hope that they have the impact desired. I think we would share that hope, but can you tell me if you believe that if all of those changes that you're recommending are implemented, then that will resolve the issues that we've been aware of for some time?
I think the issue that we have is that we are starting with quite a high number of recommendations and it's being added to all the time, and that is kind of just the nature of it. So that backlog is a concern. I think that the planning, the prioritization, if done well, will enable us to think about which ones of those can be appropriately deprioritized or superseded, where we've got recommendations that are maybe at like 95% implementation, thinking about are they still a priority, or are they still the highest priority in line with the new plan and the new prioritization. But I think getting the recommendations down to a more manageable level, the design of the process going forward should enable it to be kept on top of better. I think it needs a little bit of time for us to be able to assess whether the issue around there being an acceptance of, well, we have limited resources so we can't implement everything. Because I think if it's being prioritised as a high priority, it should get implemented and the resources should be found from somewhere. I think that might take a bit of time to change. And I guess the formal sort of like scrutiny and being held to account for being an action owner who has not implemented actions, I think needs more enhancement. And I think that's intended, but we'll just need a bit of time to see if that's kind of how it feels and operates in practice going forward.
Thank you very much, Claire. Before I bring in Tom, I wonder if any members have any particular questions they wanted to raise. Happy to have Tom in just now then. You've offered to help you, Tom.
Chair, thanks very much. Claire, thank you for the report and the reference as well to this having transferred across to my directorate relatively recently. One of the first pieces of work was to ask the audit management team to take a closer look at this. There's no dubiety, this is an unacceptable number of outstanding recommendations. Equally, the observation that there is a culture about accepting non-implementation. These are really serious recommendations, and myself, Angela, who's on the call, working with DCC Spears, are already having a broader conversation about how we better connect governance at the front end in terms of reports that are undertaken and recommendations that are accepted, the criteria that we would apply, if you like, the level of executive ownership has been a bit siloed an approach. I think that has generated as well the current position of over 300 recommendations. We're trying to pull all of that together, take a better view of things that's joined up, that actually gives visibility to the force exec right across the piece, whatever the subject area. And then, as I say, ultimately apply some criteria about the acceptance of recommendations, and then use management boards effectively, mainstream recommendations into business plans that every part of the business has. And the culture should be one of accountability for delivery. If we've accepted a recommendation, then we get it implemented, and we do it within a reasonable time frame. So there's a bit of a journey, but it's not an open-ended promise to get that done. I'm simply describing that we're taking it really seriously. Today's report, as presented, is really helpful, coupled with the work that Angela and the audit management team have done. I'm really clear on what the chief is expecting, and I know we're going to move at some pace, and we'll bring back a further update on that as the committee requires us to. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I think that's very reassuring. We're right behind you on all of this, because we really do want to see this addressed. So I think if it's given that priority that you're indicating, that should help us, and we can track that as we go forward. I noticed that Pauline and Katharina put their hands up at exactly the same time, so you can choose which of you wants to come first.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go first, because it'll just be a brief comment in light of what Tom's just said, because he's answered the areas that I wanted to explore in further. So many thanks for those comments. I was looking for that reassurance in terms of the grip that you're now putting on it, the support from the wider executive team, and the desire to move this forward at pace, Tom. So many thanks for those comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Pauline. Katharina.
I mean, not much to add from me either, because I was going to say something very similar. I think, Tom, that what you've just outlined was the reassurance I was looking for. And just to acknowledge, I mean, we look at this, and for us, the frustration is, yes, there is a high number of recommendations. It takes forever, from our perspective, to complete them. And I think what has been recognized is that the accountability element. If it's either important and it needs to be implemented, or it's not important, in which case there probably should be a degree of rationalization or pushing back or whatever it is at the front end. So Tom, kind of what you said there, if it's been accepted, it needs to be implemented. But at the same time, I think what is also important, if that personal accountability for action owners is going to be there needs to be a system that supports them with that. So giving somebody accountability without giving them the tools and resources to do it is also not necessarily, going to lead to a swift implementation of everything. So I'm sure you're cognizant of that. So overall, I suppose I am reassured by what I'm hearing, and I understand that changes do need time to be implemented. But again, I'm reassured by the fact that you said that there is a will to move at pace with some of that. And I think, if anything, and this is just me reflecting now on my own kind of executive experience. If anything, having all of that hanging in the background, I think, must be quite a distraction, I think, from a lot of other strategic objectives that the organization has. So speaking from experience, the sooner you at least get some of that house in order at the back end, the easier it will be. But I do appreciate that. I think, it will require some effort and resource to get that right, set that right, clear that, or get that into a better position. And then I think it will be better for the organization, not just with regards to recommendations, but other strategic priorities as well. So yeah, I'm reassured. Thank you for that. That was good.
Thank you, Katharina. And John?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. If it gets and committee members some reassurance. I would support what Tom has articulated from the HMICS side. You're seeing those improvements coming through. So notwithstanding Craig's recent comments around some of the challenges in the custody area, which I know are being taken forward by ACC Middleton, we spent a lot of time with Angela and our team, which I think there's also a responsibility on the audit and inspecting body, particularly for the older recommendations, to work with the team. Picking up what Claire said, if we're 80–90% complete, has the outcome been achieved rather than the letter of the recommendation? So that's something that Craig's really keen to explore. And probably finally, just a point that we've picked up is the work that DCC Smith's doing through the transformation portfolio, and we can see those recommendations featured in front and centre there, as well as the risks. So if that gives you some extra reassurance from our side, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, very helpful indeed. I do think that we should welcome the fact that this was identified as an area that Police Scotland wanted to have an audit done. I think we've all struggled with the sheer number of recommendations and the fact that it never stops. You just get rid of some and some others are coming in at the other end. So it's like pushing the boulder up the hill, isn't it? But the fact that you wanted to get some advice from auditors on what might be helpful, that you're willing to take that advice and give it priority and allocate senior resource to it, and bring this back to us at pace is all very helpful. The comments from HMICS also very useful, and I think I've certainly taken a lot of reassurance from the conversation we've had today, but we are at the point now where we need to begin to see real progress on all this. So wish Tom luck in the work that he's taking forward, but obviously Angela, others in the team, hugely important that this is allowed to be taken forward at pace and with support from senior team. So good luck with that. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll keep an eye on it. Thank you very much. So that's item 3 we've completed. So item 4, the first 2 items there, 4.1 and 4.2, I think we're going to take together, and it represents an update on the best value work that's currently underway. I don't think there's going to be anything definitive that we can be told at this stage, because we're not at that stage yet, but I'm going to hand over to John McNellis and he'll tell us what he is able to tell us about the best value audit. Hello, Alistair.
Thanks, Mary. I'm going to deliver this update just on behalf of all of policing, as this is an audit of all of the areas, so we're able to just give you a progress update on where we are with the audit and inspection. So the audit fieldwork's been largely completed now. HMICS and Audit Scotland are just doing some final queries and checks. They've been able to provide us with indicative early findings, and whilst we can't go into them, what I can say to you is that it's overall quite positive. And in fact, of the findings, most of them we'd already anticipated from the various self-assessments which have been completed, which is quite positive. We are having our emerging findings meeting with Audit Scotland and HMICS. So Police Scotland and Forensics have already had that meeting, and the Chief Executive will be meeting John Patterson and others just tomorrow, actually, to talk through some of those emerging findings. Just in terms of next steps, HMICS and Audit Scotland are working through the report writing stage now. We can expect to see early drafts in late autumn, and that will go through a QA process. And ultimately, we expect to see a final report presented to Parliament in early of the new year. So we'll keep providing the ARAC members with an update on progress. And the first opportunity we're able to share with you the findings, we'll do that.
Thank you, John. Does anybody have any questions on that or comments? I'm sure it's been a busy summer for most of the people on the call, but we are nearing the important end of this process where we get to know what the results are and what the findings are. So I think we'll just have to contain ourselves until we can hear from you when the report is drafted. But good luck with the work that's ongoing. Anybody got anything else they want to say on this one? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Moving to item 4.3 and 4.4, these are both whistleblowing reports. The first one from Police Scotland, second one from the SPA. So I think I'm handing over to, is it Lynn? Yeah, Lynn Radcliffe, thanks.
Chair, members, good morning. Could someone just let me know if you can hear me okay? The technology's not been great. Perfect, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Chair, as ever, with your indulgence, I'll take the paper as read. I'll just very quickly, if I may, draw on a couple of highlights from the paper, and you know, as well as our legislative requirements in terms of whistleblowing, you know, is very much part of our commitment to that thriving workforce and making sure that we've got a supportive, open and transparent working environment, where actually our officers and staff feel that they are supported to raise any concerns and that they do that at the earliest possible juncture. And I would just draw out in section 2 of the report, and happy to say a little bit more about it, but one of the really positive steps we've made recently is the introduction of the Crime Stoppers line for reporting all, including whistleblowing concerns, and I'll say just a little bit more about that shortly. So it's highlighted in section 3 of the paper, our National Gateway Unit, and my colleague Shirley Carr has come on just in case members have any specific questions about Gateway and some of the nuts and bolts of the whistleblowing process. But Gateway is the sort of single point of contact, the portal, if you like, for all reports that come into the organisation, including those that come in from the new Crime Stoppers line. And it gives a breakdown of the 300, over 3,500 reports come in between April 24 and March 2025. And that gives an overview in the table there of the reports, and you will see that the vast majority relate to either business interest, notifiable association or performance issues, or indeed over 50% do. Specifically then on to the protected disclosures or whistleblowing, the golden thread, if you like, is that commitment to supporting anybody who does want to raise a concern of wrongdoing and indeed does so, and that sort of emphasis and reinforcement of the fact that there is a no tolerance policy around any harassment or victimisation, and we stress that not only to the whistleblower if indeed we know their identity, but to the receiving division or department. Section 4.3, members will be familiar, I know it's covered in the SPA report, around the criteria that apply to protected disclosures. And then 4.5 goes on to highlight that between 1st of April 2024 and 31st of March 2025, we've got 38 matters recorded on PSD systems, which we've assessed to be protected disclosures, and 25 of those have been made anonymously. Now, I think it would be useful just to give some context, because I don't think the reports avert around the 38 is a bit of an increase from previous years. And I think there's a combination of factors that have affected that. The first, I think, is an increased confidence in reporting. And indeed, we've had a lot of anecdotal feedback since we launched the Crime Stoppers line, probably about a handful of weeks ago, to say that officers and staff feel a lot more confident about reporting issues because they know with absolute certainty that it's going into, at first point of contact, a third-party organisation, if you like, rather than through the Police Scotland Integrity Matters process, which absolutely is secure and anonymous, but we know that the staff survey highlighted some concerns around that. I think, if we're being honest, we've become better within the organisation and within the Professional Standards Department at identifying matters that may actually fall within that protected disclosure criteria. And as I say, as a result of the Crime Stoppers line going live, I actually expect that number will increase due to that increased confidence via that particular mechanism. So, as I say, 38 protected disclosures during the year, and the remainder of the report really sets out the next steps over 2025, 2026 in terms of keeping that high profile around whistleblowing, refreshing the Moodle packages, and that ongoing engagement internally to make sure that officers, staff and line managers understand what protected disclosures are about and what our obligations are. And I think Just finally, I would say that the introduction of the Crime Stoppers line was in direct response to something that was raised within the staff survey. And again, I think the SPA report references it too. One of the questions there was around staff and officers feeling confident that there is a safe environment in which they can raise concerns. And although we did get a lot of positive feedback around that, I think it's imperative that we explore other ways that the officers and staff can raise concerns. And as I say, the Crime Stoppers line went live about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Really good positive feedback about that, and I hope that that is a sort of trusted vehicle, if you like, for those within our organisation to bring these concerns forward. So as I say, I take the paper as read by members, and myself and Shirley are more than happy to take any questions that yourself, Chair, or members might have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Paul?
Yeah, can I ask, excuse my ignorance, is a protected disclosure the same as whistleblowing? Is, you know...
I suppose the short answer is yes, and as you'll see there, you know, the criteria that's set out there is that the truly held belief of the reporter, whether they're named or anonymous, has to be that they are raising it, if you like, in the public interest. So, and to all intents and purposes, in terms of how those are treated, then yes is the answer to that question.
So this is always in-house staff members or a police officer that's raising it. It's not a member of the general public.
In terms of the protected disclosures for Police Scotland, then yes, it would be either a member of police staff or a police officer who's witnessed something in the workplace that they're concerned about and they report it in.
Okay, because I couldn't pick that up from the report itself. Maybe I've just missed that definition there. Can I ask then, you've got 38 matters that come under this category out of the various complaints that have been raised. Do we know how many of those have subsequently been found to be genuinely whistleblowing rather than maybe grievance or something else? Because that often is the case. I've seen through years of looking at whistleblowing in other organisations that people sometimes conflate grievance with whistleblowing.
So it's a very good question, and I'll probably bring Shirley in around some of the finer details. So I think what it's important to say is that even if the matter is investigated and it's established that it's not technically whistleblowing or protected disclosure, it does not change the protected status of that person. So their protections do not drop away post that. In terms of those 38 that are referenced in the report, around about 60% of those have been found to be criminal and are within the criminal and either Cap D or non off-duty criminal reporting. About 15% have gone into PERC, and the remainder are, as you've referenced there, internal processes around potentially grievance or performance or something like that. Shirley, might I ask, do you have any stats to hand around those that we have assessed and rounded off as absolutely being within the auspices of that legislation?
Thanks, ma'am. Morning, folks. So
good morning,
yeah,
Shirley.
Morning. So of the 38, the National Gateway Unit who record them and assess them in conjunction with myself, all of those 38 we have concluded, and they are out to various divisions. I would have to come back to you on the actual amount of them that are concluded, because they can be out to various national divisions or other areas within PSD. But as the ACC said, the people who are given protected disclosure status do keep that irrespective of the final outcome.
Yeah, no, I'm just, where I'm coming from is just getting a sense of how many are actually whistleblowing cases and how many are actually grievances that have just been lodged under their own category. And I'm not saying that means they're any less valid, but it's yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
The specific grievance ones is looking like, from my information, a very small number. The majority of them are criminal and PERC or internal, but I would have to come back with exact information on that.
If you could, that would be helpful.
Yep. I think in terms of this report, when we bring it in future, I think there's a couple of things that I would probably like to draw out in a bit more detail, and maybe just give a bit more of a breakdown of those categories, accepting that it is sensitive information and we have to exercise due diligence around that, but more than happy to take that point away, provide some feedback on the specific question, and if it's appropriate for us to do so and the committee would like us to do so, then we can incorporate that breakdown into the next report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.
That's me.
Katharina, you had your hand up.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lynn, for the report. And this conversation here has been really good as well. It's kind of covered up some of the questions I had as well. But if I just kind of lift it up a level, Lynn, so I think we see the same format of the report for the last certainly few years. Once a year it comes up, and and so I really welcome, Lynn, your kind of commitment to making sure that it's a bit more detailed sort of going forward. So I think that would be very, very welcome. And this is a challenge I've kind of expressed, I think, to Alan Spears as well over the last few years. So this isn't a new challenge, but I suppose once a year I kind of rehash it, and I'm quite keen to kind of get a little bit more under the skin of it. So the overall number of referrals that goes into PSD and GAO is quite large. So we've got 3,610 referrals. The percentage of 38 concerns that have been identified or have been deemed to be protected disclosures is quite a small percentage of that overall kind of funnel of concerns that go in. And similar to Paul, again, I've seen that not everything that comes in as a concern is necessarily whistleblowing. There is all sorts of elements there. And I think what does give me a degree of comfort is that you say from the report and from previous conversations that it is being assessed. So every single case is being assessed and it's kind of being funneled somewhere. But when it comes to that 38 kind of protected disclosures, I do wonder if it should not be a higher number, because actually, so the criteria that you have outlined do come from legislation, but actually, when it comes to concealment of information, when it comes to likely to fail to comply with any legal obligation. So in my experience, it can actually cover a whole variety of scenarios. And I basically wonder what degree of, in terms of questions, so firstly, what degree of internal assurance do you have that that triage process is appropriate and that you aren't sifting things out that should have been protected disclosures, but you maybe mark them as not protected disclosures and don't treat them as such? Because at the moment, with my assurance hat on, all I see is a large number at the top of the funnel, a very small number at the end of this, and a unit in the middle. And without being critical to the unit, but with an assurance hat, I'm just really quite keen to understand, how can you be certain that there shouldn't be more cases that are disclosures? And I have a degree of insight into how NHS handles whistleblowing concerns. And certainly if we had that number coming in at the top, there would be a much higher number that within the NHS would be deemed protected disclosures. So that's the first question. The second question, then, for those that you don't deem to be whistleblowing, but you manage them differently, what degree of feedback do you give to the individuals, or you can provide that feedback? Because some of them I appreciate will be anonymous. But actually, again, drawing parallels within NHS, if somebody comes in and says, I've got a whistleblowing concern, the organization looks at it and says, we actually don't agree, this is more like a grievance or something else. There is an escalation route to the INVO, Independent National Whistleblowing Officer. So there is basically something that people can take that forward. So I'm wondering what degree of feedback loop is there to the individuals who've raised the concerns where you didn't deem it to be a protected disclosure. I'm just going to pause there. So I suppose I'm looking more at that assurance around somebody reports something, you deem it to be whistleblowing or not. So how certain are you, and what is the level of feedback that goes between you and the individuals who are submitting those concerns?
I'll come in, if I may, Katerina, and then likewise bring Shirley in to add any of the finer details. So I think the question about internal assurance is a really, really important one. And I hate to say that I am encouraged by an increasing number of reports, because in itself, that's concerning because people have felt that there are issues that they must raise. But I am actually encouraged by that because, as you are, we are very keen as an organisation to make sure that in every instance where there's a matter that needs to be addressed, whether it's via whistleblowing and protected disclosure or otherwise, that it's reported and we've got the opportunity to do that. So in terms of the 38 that are specifically referenced, there are a couple of things that I would point out. Our staff have undergone significant training within the Gateway unit to understand and pick up where a matter may fall into that protected status and whistleblowing status. So the awareness within the Gateway unit itself has improved. And as I said earlier, as a result of that, I'm confident that we're picking up more. Because of the work that we have done within the organisation in a broader sense to raise awareness around whistleblowing, protected status and the rights that affords you, if you like, as a whistleblower, we are actually seeing an increase in the number of reports that come in where people are themselves calling it out, that they regard themselves as a whistleblower. So again, that helps us get that assurance. We are absolutely committed, as the paper outlines, to making sure that that training and awareness raising continues, both within the reporters and the assessors. And I think something that will be really, really important to us is a check and balance. I see that John Patterson from HMICS I see John is still on the call. Whistleblowing did form part of the HMICS conduct review. And that report I know will be forthcoming. But again, we are really, really keen to see what, if any, recommendations HMICS colleagues will make in that regard, because we have shared with them sensitively and appropriately with the appropriate measures in place, the whistleblowing spreadsheet, how we assess, how we record, and how we take that forward. So those three things, if you like, are the main ways in which we seek to get continually that assurance that people are putting their head above the parapet and raising things. To move on to the second question around feedback, that can be difficult, but be assured that we do that as much and as frequently as possible in terms of the amount of information we give. A significant number of the reports that come in are anonymous, and they come through also now a couple of external mechanisms, but we are able to report feedback through those too. But where we can give a specific update to an officer because we know that we know their identity and we're able to say that we've assessed the matter and we are taking it down a particular route, we absolutely do that. The matters sometimes, though, in terms of feedback are compounded because where something has gone into the conduct of the criminal space, then sub judice and also the privacy afforded around the conduct regulations can make it very, very difficult for us to let officers know specifically what's happened with a matter that they have reported. But I think I'm right in saying, Shirley, if I may rely on your expertise around Gateway, every report, if you like, is acknowledged that we have received it, and where possible, we were able to give specifics around a route that a complaint or an issue is going down, we do that. And also just to get that check and balance around grievance, we have a committee that meets on a monthly basis. That's comprised of people from Professional Standards Department, our Fair Play Advisor, and also P&D, to make sure that there's nothing that's come in specifically through the grievance route that needs to be switched into that whistleblowing or protected disclosure route. But Shirley, may I bring you in around anything that you may want to ask, particularly around, around the feedback aspect of the question?
Thanks, ma'am. Yeah, I just concur with what the ACC has said. We do, where possible, provide feedback to reporters of perceived wrongdoing, and whether that's direct to them or via our support and service delivery superintendents in division to feed that back where we can. in terms of the governance and oversight of assessments, every referral that comes in of those 3,600 are assessed and reviewed by senior management in PSD, and that includes myself for protected disclosure. Also have the availability of our legal services to consult, and our external contractors Protect, who also are in hand to provide additional training and advice, etc., to myself and officers within Gateway Unit, and we regularly attend their sessions just to make sure we're fully up to speed with anything new that's coming in.
Okay, thank you, Shirley. Katharina, did you want to come back in?
No, I mean, thank you for that explanation. I suppose it would be good to see the outcome of the HMSCS report. So waiting for that. And I'm reassured that this will form part of the scope as well. So I think that's good. So I think that will give us another triangulation point on this. You know, I appreciate your answers, Lynn. So I think what I will kind of pause after this, but I think what I'm reading from this is looking at a lot of these things, all of these concerns, all of the 3,610 concerns that have come in. Somebody has said that something criminal is happening, and I think that's kind of what I read from the report. So I think in a lot of other institutions, all of those would be considered cases of whistleblowing. By the sounds of it, what then happens is you do an initial assessment as to whether or not there is a case to answer, and then you say, well, actually there isn't. So maybe it's just a question of organizational kind of definition of whistleblowing, because all of these are somewhere where somebody presumably says, look, there has been a degree of criminality and I'm concerned about this. And I think, so from my perspective, I'm sorry, just kind of trying to wrap my head around this. I think what will be good is to see the outcome of the report. And what I would also really appreciate, Lynn, I think at some stage in chair, if you're amenable to this, that we maybe do a little bit more of a deeper dive as to how those 38 differ from from the rest. So what makes those protected disclosures versus some other ones that don't? I appreciate it might need to be a development session or a private session, because quite clearly we can't discuss specific cases, at that level of detail in a public space due to confidentiality concerns. But I would just really appreciate a little bit more of a deeper dive into what segregates those 38 from the other ones. It's just because that reduction from this number down to this number, I'm keen to understand a little bit more the mechanism behind that, just to be assured that that is indeed, appropriate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina. Before I bring you in, Lynn, I think what I would find useful on the back of what Katharina is saying is to have more of an understanding about what happens to the other 3,500 and odd referrals. It's a very large number. These are all coming, as you said in response to Paul's question earlier, from police officers or police staff. A number of them clearly relate to potentially criminal conduct. There's criminal behaviour, there's sexual misconduct, there's controlled drugs, disclosure of information. Some of these are clearly criminal, potentially criminal issues. And that represents the majority of the 38 whistleblowing cases are also to do with criminality. But there are quite a number of other situations where there's nothing criminal being alleged, perhaps, but something still that's serious and requires Police Scotland's investigation. So I suppose what would be helpful would be maybe in this deeper dive session that Katharina is mentioning, to have a better understanding of what you do with the other 3,500. What level of investigation is there? What learning is there from it? What does it do in terms of changing the way in which people report things? Because these are all people, making allegations about wrongdoing, and some of it very serious potentially. So we just need to know, well, what do you do with it? What do you do with the rest of them if they're not whistleblowing? And I recognise that this is definitely just a whistleblowing report, so we should be concentrating on the ones that are, but the implications for us of the ones that aren't, vast majority that aren't, they're still potentially quite serious and require to be investigated. And I'm sure you are investigating them, but it's to what extent and what happens and what's the sort of output from all of that. So maybe come back to that. Now, Lynn, do you want to come back at this stage, or will I bring Pauline in? She's been waiting rather a long time.
Not at all, Chair, thank you. If I just may say very quickly, more than happy to do that, because if I start to outline that today, we'll be here for the rest of the meeting, but please have that assurance they are all assessed and investigated. What I would just say, and to the very valid point that Katharina had made about the criminal input to that 3,610, not all of that is on-duty criminality. The vast majority of our of the criminality, if you like, involving police officers and police staff, and indeed this is reflected in our suspension and our duty restricted officers, relates to off-duty criminality. So I wouldn't say categorically that off-duty criminality that there might not be an occasion where whistleblowing applies, but generally when you look at that criteria set out within the legislation and the public interest bit, the off-duty criminality, I would say that it would be very rare for those two to overlap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me anyway. Thank you very much, Lynn. See Katharina nodding. So go now to Pauline. Thank you for your patience, Pauline.
No, not at all. It actually follows on from the conversation we've just been having. I very much welcome the work to encourage reporting and to provide feedback to those that are reporting any perceived issues. I wonder if you could give us an update on how any organisational learning is being applied as a result of the issues that are being uncovered from the reports that are coming in, Lynn, and if it helps, bring it to life with an example.
So the organisational learning piece is very much a common theme. And we have a number of mechanisms within our existing governance arrangements and specific groups and meetings whereby we can decant out any learning at the sort of assessment stage, if you like, of anything that comes in. We've spoken about a couple of committees this week, and I see that Director McMahon is on the line, so I may call on his expertise around. Director McMahon has been tasked by the DCC in taking forward the broader sort of concept, if you like, of organisational learning and procuring a platform whereby we can upload learning, advice, information from all across the organisation so that we have that holistic platform, if you like. But in terms of specifically around PSD, anti-corruption and whistleblowing related matters, as Shirley has alluded to, we have a single point of contact across every single business area in the division. And those are our go-to people around both incoming work to the department and us feeding out to them. So we're able to do that at a very local level if it's relevant for us to do that, but we're also able to do it at a regional and a national level through our governance structures, through our heads of department meetings, through divisional commanders meetings, and through the series of boards that we have. I'm trying to think while I'm speaking of a specific example that might illustrate that well and bring it to life, and it's eluding me right now, but Shirley, any that you can think of that might actually make the point that when something comes into the gateway unit and we've identified a broader issue that we might need to address at that local, regional or national level, we have decanted that out and we've seen some feedback come in from that. And if not, we will think of one over the course of today and get that articulated to members of chairs contemporaries to do that. But Shirley, I'll bow to your greater knowledge of the specific cases if you like.
Ma'am, I'll probably just concur with you and I'll give it some thought as to provide a specific example. But as you say, we do have... Wait, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, as you say, we do have various mechanisms for feedback, both coming into PSD and us feeding back out to commanders and departments. But I will come back to you specifically with something that's suitable for this forum.
Okay, thank you. Pauline? Thank you. Okay, well, that's been a really good discussion, and I think we're got the potential to really make good progress on this now. I think everybody's content to take up Katharina's idea of a deep dive session to look at this in more detail. So we'll ask colleagues to make arrangements for that to happen, and maybe by then we'll have the HMICS report as well, and that will be another useful element of all of this. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Lynn and Shirley, in particular, for your contributions there. Okay, moving on then to item 4.5, which is the Police Scotland Assurance Audit for SCRS crime compliance. So I'm not sure who's presenting this. John, is that you?
Chair, just to say we missed the SPA whistleblowing report.
Oh, sorry, so we
4.4.
did. Apologies. How could I? John, you're on. It's the SPA annual whistleblowing report at item 4.4.
Thanks, Chair. So it's similar to the last item. That this covers the SPA, so the SPA corporate and forensic services. And over the last year, we've had no reports of whistleblowing that have been classified, which is fairly consistent actually with previous trends, just I think given the size of the SPA. So the report that you have really focuses on understanding the controls around whistleblowing, that we have the right policies and procedures in place, and also trying to measure the level of confidence that our staff have, both that they understand what whistleblowing is, how they can report that, and I think most importantly, which the ARAC have been interested in the past, is do our staff have the confidence to speak up and report if they have a concern? And so our proud of paper, you can see we've measured that through our staff surveys, where we have relatively high percentages of our staff that say they have that level of confidence. Our last survey in the SPA, we were reporting 84% of staff said that they have the confidence to report if they did have a concern, which we think is pretty positive, and that's been fairly consistent over time. We're also expecting that our next staff survey, which has just been launched, will give us again more information about confidence to report various concerns, not just whistleblowing. And I think what overall the report concludes is that we've got effective controls. There are some areas of improvement which are flagged in the report, which we'll continue to look at, and that's just based on our annual self-assessment against the ISO standard, which we look to make sure we're complying with. So those are just the key highlights that I'd want to pull out, Chair.
Yep, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for John? Pauline.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. I wondered, I thought the table in section 5.1 was really helpful, but I note that that's for SPA corporate. Do we have a similar table for forensics?
We don't specifically. So that was the staff survey that was done for SP, and at the time there was slightly different arrangements for staff surveys across the different areas of policing. What we're hoping is that the survey, which is just launched now, is the same survey across all different areas of policing. So for next year, we will have the information to be able to say across all areas how staff are feeling. But at the minute, I don't think we have that evidence unless Craig is going to be able to correct me. But I don't think so.
Okay.
If I may, we don't have that information. Certainly, from my own input to the staff survey, this time we can differentiate between SPA corporate and forensic services. So that will provide us more information that will be helpful for ourselves and SPA.
Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. It's just because the SPA have been doing those pulse surveys for the last 3 years, and other parts of the system haven't been doing that. So that's why we have that information. But it's really reassuring to know that going forward we'll have that across the whole of the policing family.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks very much. Okay, so we are now at item 4.5. I was ahead of myself there, but item 4.5 on the crime compliance stats. So is this yourself, Angela?
It is, thanks, Chair. Thank you. I'll take the paper as read also. The purpose of this paper is to provide the board oversight and assurance on the integrity of Police Scotland crime recording practices. This also is in line with the recommendation 1 from the HMICS crime audit in 2020, which stated that SP and Police Scotland should ensure that the results of internal and external crime recording audits are publicly reported. I think it's worthy of highlight that through Scottish Government, Police Scotland remain the only police force in the UK to retain the National Statistics Badge for recorded crime. And this paper outlines the findings from our first SCRS compliance audit since the inception of the National Crime System. The audit sets a baseline confirming alignment with national standards, identifies areas for improvements and supports transparency, accountability and public confidence in crime recording. Overall, these results reflect a steady progress towards a self-imposed benchmark of 95%. Most divisions are approaching that compliance expectation. While the recent implementation of the new crime system, which is now functioned directly by direct officer input, has successfully aligned the disparate legacy systems and processes, a short-term dip in performance and compliance was anticipated. There does remain opportunities for further improvements, and the variation in compliance highlights the need for targeted guidance and formal embedding of best practice and lessons learned from those high-performing divisions. To support and accelerate this improvement, the crime registrars have already developed a range of associated recommendations aimed at reinforcing consistent application across all divisions. These recommendations are already in progress and are tracked and managed by the registrars. Oversight is led by our National Crime Managers Forum, and the progress is reported to our Police Scotland Audit and Risk Board. HMICS are due to return to Police Scotland this autumn to conduct their own crime audit, and we do hope to see further improvements within our compliance rates from this audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any questions or comments from members? Pauline.
Yeah, just to comment on noting the improvements that are being made, and particularly I think it's worthy of noting the relatively good compliance and improvements in the bigger, busiest divisions too, because often that's a real challenge. So well done to them, given the demand that they're facing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pauline. Can I ask if it's intended that this will be reported to ARAC annually, Angela?
So this year, the registrars aren't completing an audit due to the fact that HMICS are coming in to conduct their own crime audit, and we felt that wasn't the best use of our resources. So this year, the crime registrars are focusing on intelligence-led audits based on the findings from this particular audit. So it wouldn't be an annual one, no. We did previously report this annually up until 2014, when the decision was taken that we should only be exception reporting due to the high standard of compliance that was demonstrated by Police Scotland. So it's really at the wish of the board, although HMICS obviously did make that recommendation in 2020 that they would like to see that public reporting and, you know, within this arena, but happy to take your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't want duplication. If HMICS are doing this work, it shouldn't be necessary for it to be also done internally. But I think if it's a fallow year for HMICS in respect of crime stats, then it would be helpful to have this kind of report coming to the committee to give us reassurance. One of the things, oh sorry, John, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously supporting what Angela's saying there, and again give the committee the assurance that the conversations have already started with Police Scotland. So whilst the audit will be later in the autumn, the lead inspector will be Maggie is working with Angela and the team and has got great visibility on this. But there's maybe a wider point that just to reflect for the committee of the benefit of the transformation programme in Police Scotland and the move to the single crime system. And maybe that's sitting behind some of the benefits that's taking place. So aligning that wider work with what you're seeing now, and just picking up in Pauline's comments, because that didn't exist in 2020, and it's something obviously the HMI will look at now. So I think it's just another indication of the benefits of transformation.
Thank you very much, John. Yeah, that's really helpful. I suppose my final question then on this one is around the various or the variances we see across divisions in terms of good performance and not so good. And I wondered if we have any mechanisms for picking up good practice where divisions are particularly good in terms of their crime recording stats, and whether we share the good practice with the other divisions then.
Yes, I can answer that, Chair. So we have a National Crime Managers Forum, which is the hub for that lessons learned and sharing practices. And the crime registrars are regionally based. We have 3. They work collectively as well to make sure that those standards are consistent across the divisions. The huge variances were also due to the amount of change for those divisions in terms of, for example, within the West, the legacy systems, there would be a single crime would go, all crimes would go in a single report. In this new system, it's a single crime per report. So there's some huge differences for the inputs for police officers to learn and take on board this new system. And that has also kind of contributed to that differences across the different areas due to the fact that it was different learning curves, I would suggest, for different divisions based on the amount of change this new system brought to them.
Yeah, thank you. That really does make sense. Yeah, thank you very much. Helps us understand some of the variations, so thank you. If there are no other questions on this, then we move to item 5, which is the final item in the public session, and that's our committee work plan. Anyone have any concerns, any issues? If not, we'll simply note that this is our work plan, and it'll keep all of us busy for the next few months, so it's no for noting. And before we bring the public session to a close, I think it would be remiss of me not to recognise that, given her imminent retrial, this is potentially Lynn's last public meeting of the committee. And I think all of the members of the committee and those who support the committee would want me to recognise, Lynn, your enormous support for us as ARAC. Right from the first time it was suggested to me that I might have a role in ARAC, I was keen to know that I would have Lynn's support, and it was conditional on that, and that has never been anything other than forthcoming. So personally, huge thank you to you, Lynn, but I think I'm speaking for the whole committee when we say we do recognise not just how valuable your support for us has been, but how valuable your leadership of the SPA has been. So we'd want to recognise that publicly before we go into private session. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. It's really kind of you. I hadn't really thought you were going to say that, so it's taken me by surprise. I'd just like to say I think this is a really professional committee. I know that you've really supported me and you've really made changes in terms of the oversight around probity and in the policing family. And I'd just like to say, however, the work of the finance staff in Police Scotland, the work of John McNellis is outstanding. I think this committee really owes him a huge debt, and also to others in the police and family for their support. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. It's typical of you to make sure that the praise is shared with colleagues, but thank you for that. And if we can do anything to make sure that your final annual report and accounts go through smoothly, the committee has a role, obviously, in being able to give you assurance on certain issues that you need to be assured about. So we'll work with you over the next few weeks to make sure that can happen. So thank you very much. We're now moving into a private session, but we'll take a short 15-minute comfort break if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so see you in 50 minutes, 11:45. Okay.